Hello everybody, it is Barry, or Eberkneezer as I'm known on Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, Discord, lots of different places. Today I want to go through the process that I use to paint the freehand skulls on my Chaos Land Raider. I've gotten a lot of good positive feedback about how these look. Seems like a lot of people really like how they turn out. So I'm just going to take you through the process of how I accomplish this look on my Land Raider. So it's sort of a tutorial. I'll link all the paint colors I'm using in the additional description on the video, so you can just click over there and you can see it on the show more for the drop down. So what I'm going to start out with here is a paint that is similar, very close to, but a little bit darker than the base color that I'm painting on, because I want these skulls to look like they're sort of floating but made out of the same thing, kind of ghostly. I want them to be a similar color, and they're going to be monochromatic. They're going to be all red to make them really stand out. But first thing I do is just sketch out the shape. Now, I would highly recommend that you try to draw what you're going to freehand at the scale that you're going to paint it on. So do it the same size you're going to paint it and everything. And if you can't draw it with a pencil, you're going to have a really hard time drawing it with a brush. But to begin, I always start out with the color that's very similar. You can see I'm painting here. This color is almost the same as what I'm putting it on. You can barely see the outline. The reason I do that is because I can fine-tune this shape. I can make it a little bigger in areas where I didn't get it right in the sketch, or I could make it a little smaller. I could do things because it's almost the same color. So it won't be obvious if I had to deviate from this first sketch. So the first step out of several that I'm going to go through is to just sketch out the shape. And I'm doing the skull here. Now, I didn't draw this out first because I've literally drawn and painted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of skulls in my life. So the skull for me is just easy. It was the biggest thing I did when I did custom automotive paint and stuff like that. Choppers and custom trucks and cars and all that. I always painted skulls on them. Everybody wanted me to paint skulls. So skulls are pretty simple for me. But this is the basic shape. You got a circle. You got the face part of the skull where the teeth drop down. I'm doing it like a 3/4 view, so this is kind of the shape to start with. So if you want to follow me and do the exact same skull that I'm doing here, I start with the outline, and then I start to sketch in the dark spots, like the eye recesses, the nose, and the outer edge of the skull. And then the skull always has a a cheekbone on it, where it starts like where your ear is, and it comes up to your eye socket. And there's kind of an indentation for your temple there. So once you get that drawn out, you can kind of move on to the next step. So as I go through this, I'm going to commentate a little bit at the beginning, and then I'm just going to fast forward through what I'm doing. So this video won't be an hour and a half long. That's how long it took me to paint this skull from beginning to end. Okay, so I'm just going to speed up the video now, and I'll stop again when we get to the second step, which is the first highlight. Okay, at this point, I've got the basic sketch, and I'm going into the first highlight. And what you'll see as we get to this video is I go from light, and then I go to dark, and then I go to light, and then I go to dark, and I try to balance out back and forth. So I don't go all dark to where it looks really dark, and I don't go super bright so that I lose the scale between the two. So I bounce back and forth, and it keeps everything sort of balanced, and I know where I need to do a shadow and where I need to do a highlight. For the dark shadows on this model, I'm using purple because it looks nice on the tank. And in this light, when I put the purple on under my bright daylight bulb, it reflects purple. But you'll see in the still shots of this that it doesn't read purple at all. It actually looks like really, really dark red. So it works out really well. Now that I'm doing the first highlight, I'm going to go glazes. And you'll see on my web palette as I go, I get these paints super thin. The little white spot that's to the right on my palette is actually just airbrush medium that I use for glazing to keep my paints thin, but it doesn't scatter the pigment. The pigment still stays really smooth in there, so I can glaze easier. And now that I'm going in with the highlight, I'm making it super thin so that I'm going to build up layers because glazes you can see right through. And if you do this slowly, you can sort of alter the shape of your sketch. So anywhere your sketch isn't just right, you can use these highlights and kind of correct it because you're going to push shadow right against it later and smooth it out that way. So by going back and forth, you also give yourself the ability to ultimately change and tweak the shape of your freehand that you're doing. So now I'm just going to use a red. It's pretty bright to go in and sort of start building up where my highlights would be based on where I set my point of light as a reference. I'll go in and hit the bridge of the nose. The cheekbone under the eye socket is sticking out. The brow above the eye sockets, I usually give them like an exaggerated scowl look to the brow, even though skulls don't really have that. I think it looks cool. And then I'll do both sides on the cheekbones, and then I'll start to build up the round part under your nose that follows the shape of your teeth. It's kind of rounded. I'll start building that in, and then there's also a deep shadow that's under the cheekbone, and I'll kind of get close to that to line up where that's going to be. So even though I'm sketching in a highlight, it's a first highlight, and it will be sort of more sketching to get it just right in the shape I want it, because that first sketch, I didn't put in every detail. I just wanted the basic shape to follow. And you'll see later in the video, I get to a point and realize I could squeeze in a bottom jaw, so I just painted a bottom jaw, which is another cool thing about doing in glazes, because they're easily painted over. So I'm going to go back and speed up the video now so we get to the next step, but you can still watch how I'm using the palette and my process of dragging the glazes up into the highest point of reflection so that it builds up in the same way light would build up. Okay, now I'm going to move into the first shadow. So I'm going to do the same process, except I'm going to work on the dark colors. So now I'm going to go back to a darker color that I just laid down and start putting in shadow. So it needs to be darker than the darkest red of your base coat for this. And this same process can be applied to anything. If you're doing a freehand that's in full color of something like a banner or something else, a chapter logo or something, you can do the exact same process, but you'll be doing a full color work each time. So if your banner has 5 colors in it, then you're probably going to have, like 15 colors on your palette, so that you can go up and down in darkness and brightness on each color as you fill it in and paint it. But it's the same process. I go light, dark, and then you don't go completely off the reservation when you get to a point where you go too dark and then everything looks dark, or you go way too bright and you have no shadows. You can bounce back and forth and then tweak the shape and the design and the look and perfect it as you go. So now I'm taking that dark purple and I'm filling in the deepest, darkest spots of the skull, which should be inside the nose cavity, inside the eye cavities, in the temple area, above the cheekbone, and under the cheekbone, where you can kind of see the back of the skull, and you got this spot that's under the cheekbone but behind the teeth, sort of right there, and like where your molars would be in your head. So I'm just going through, and remember, it's important when you do a glaze. When you do a glaze, it creates a gradual spread of the pigment from dark to low pigment to light pigment. So if it's dark, it's going to go darker or lighter. So I drag the pigment in the direction of the darkest part of the shadow, and I just keep dragging and dragging, glazing into the eye sockets. I pull it from the bottom of the eye socket to the top, because if the light is above the eye, the darkest part of the eye cavity is going to be at the very top, because it's the most shaded from the light source. And I just keep pulling in that direction to build up that gradual pigment layer over and over, so it gets darker and darker. And then the next step, we're going to go into the second highlight. So I'm going to fast forward and talk to you once we get there. Okay, second highlights now. So in this step, I'm going to take every place that was already highlighted in the first highlight, and I'm going to go even brighter in those areas. So I'm going to highlight the previously highlighted section of the skull. So anywhere there's a highlight, I'm going to drag the pigment to where the light source would be on that portion of the skull, like in his brow, over his eyes, on the top of his forehead, the top of head, on the cheekbones, the bottoms of the eye cavities. Bridge of his nose is going to be super bright, and then I start sketching in the teeth and things. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I've got a really watery glaze on my palette. I'm going to go up a color and highlight, and I'm going to start glazing in, pulling towards the light source, and I will fast forward now and catch you on the next step, which will be the second shadow to go even darker. Okay, now I'm going to really strengthen the shadows that are in the skull. Got my second highlight in, it's brighter now, but now I really need to go dark in the cavities of the skull. So I'm going to go in, load up my brush, get a good glaze, mixing that purple and the dark red together, wicking off the extra on my brush so I can glaze easier. And I'm going to start hitting those dark recess areas, so really defining where the light and the dark come together on this skull. And this is the point also where I decide, you know what, I just need to add a jawbone to this skull. So you'll see me kind of add that in at the end. Alright, speed it up, and I'll see you on the next step. Okay, now we're going to pull it all together. So I've been going light, light, dark, dark, light, light, dark, dark. Now we got to get in those middle colors where things come together. Because I've got super bright and super dark. Now I need to build in those midtones in between everything. So I'll go back to one of the darker shades of red that I have, and I'll start just glazing together anywhere where the transitions need to be a little smoother. I'm also going to finish out this jawbone that I added in with midtones too, but anywhere where things take a little too high of a jump, or I need to add a little bit of gradation inside of the highlights, then I'll do it now to sort of pull everything together and make it smooth. Alright, I'm going to speed up the film now until the next step of defining all the highlights. Okay, now it's going to get serious. We got to go for those extreme highlights. I'm going to step up in my colors here to Wild Rider Red from GW, and then I'll go all the way up into the next paint on my palette over to the right is Sunny Skin Tone. Sunny Skin Tone, whoo, from Vallejo Model Color. So I'm going to go in and just start putting down. You see, I'm not really washing here. I'm not making a glaze. I'm going for my paint to be thicker, so I get a more opaque finish when I put it on, because those highlights and glints are brighter than a glaze. A glaze represents a smooth surface, but the glint, that highlight at the end, needs to be more opaque so it jumps out, right? And I'll build it up. You'll see me kind of make it into a glaze and then go back and forth with the glaze and a little more of the opaque paint that's not a glaze, so that I can build within that highlight sort of a gradation of a glint on it. And you'll see as I go how I do it. I'll get brighter, and then I'll just grab opaque and like put a spot for the highest reflection in the middle. And this is getting close to being done. I added some horns in here. You see I could add them on the fly because I'm glazing everything. Nothing's really super solidified anywhere because I'm using glazes and everything's smooth, and it's easy for me to just go back to a lighter or darker shade and just start sketching right over top of my painting. And that's how I was able to add in that jawbone and now these extra horns I put on this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and let you watch me paint this out. Notice when on my palette, when I go to a watery glaze and when I just go straight into the puddle of paint for a more opaque highlight. And I'll let this speed up and I'll talk to you on the last step, which is going to be really defining those shadows. Okay, this is the final step of finishing out all the shadows, and then I'm going to do a glaze around the entire skull that's like a fade that gets darker as it gets closer to the outer edge of the skull to make it sort of look like it's floating off the surface, but also kind of like in a weird ghostly sort of way. So it's kind of incorporated but separate. You'll see what I mean when I get through this. For this, the purple and glazing up, you really got to get that purple thin. That glaze has got to be super thin because I'm going to do a lot of applications where I sweep up to the edge of the skull, which is going to leave all the pigment closest, where I stop my sweep right at the edge of the skull. And then what I do is I get it kind of close first, so my glaze is short. But then, as I get that first or second glaze around the edge in a short stroke, I start to extend the stroke out past that one and sweep all the way up to the skull again, and that gives a smoother gradation of the glaze. So this is one of the final steps at the end. After this, I'm just going to show you the finished product. There's 4 skulls on this tank. I'll show you all 4 of them so you can see. And remember, like and subscribe. It really helps me know which of these videos you want to see more of. In the comments, go in and tell me anything you might want to see or any questions you might have. I got plenty of other ideas for videos, but I would love to know what you think I should do next, what would help you the most, so I can give you what you need to see, what you're most curious about, and what I can help you the most with in what I know about painting that maybe you want to know. And I would love to hear from you guys anyway. So please put in some comments. Please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you at the end of the video. Alright guys, that's it for the video. Here's the final photo of what it turned out like. I'm going to show you some more pictures of the tank that I've done, the other skulls that are on there too. Sure hope you like this. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what you didn't like about this video in the comments, and I will catch you in the next video.